Free Market Wisdom to Ponder. Not by Bill Mitchell. On the ABC PM program, Tuesday, April 26, there was a segment on the claim by the Australian Council of Social Services, ACOS, that the upcoming federal budget should provide more for the poor by explicitly targeting the rich. Here is the transcript of the segment. The so-called expert that the ABC interviewed as the opponent of the proposal, one Mike Nahan, who is the executive director of the free market think tank, the Institute for Public Affairs, IPA, presented a breathtaking command of economics. If the standard of public debate that the ABC is meant to foster is characterized by the trend of the ABC to interview experts like this, then I will soon also be calling for the privatization of the national broadcaster on the grounds that it is already a private sector organization, in the sense that it seems intent only on venting the vested interests of private profit-seeking groups. The story began with the ABC journalist stating that ACOS, quote, states it's identified 11 billion ways for the federal government to find more money for essential services, starting with tax concessions for the rich, end quote. The champions of free enterprise, the IPA responded with the cliche, quote, one person's tax break is another one's essential, end quote. Whatever that means. Well, it turns out to mean the following. First, ACOS wants to do away with negative gearing, wrongly reported by the ABC to be the capital gains tax. This is the scheme where you get tax deductions from your total assessable income for all interest payments in servicing a loan for specific investments and costs, such as property, shares, or small businesses. If the interest on the borrowings for a selected investment exceeds the rental income from the property is then considered negatively geared. Investors then hope that the net increment in capital value of the property in the future is greater than the cash loss made in the short run, taking into account the tax savings. It is thus a public subsidy to allow individuals with the cash reserves to service the initial debt, to speculate in the property market, and increase their long-run wealth. It is at the expense of those with less immediate means. It also probably contributes to asset price real estate speculation, which further disadvantages the poor. It is spuriously claimed that negative gearing helps maintain affordable housing for poorer tenants via a competitive low-price rental market. To justify this claim, proponents point to the 1985 decision by the Hawke government to withdraw the tax concession and the resulting downturn in private sector new building dwelling approvals. Most of this bluster comes from real estate institutes and related lobby groups or investment banks wanting to expand housing credit. They never tried to seek a scientific, that is, a research-based understanding of the downturn in housing and the rise in rents in 1986. One of the few studies that has delved into this matter is from housing geographers Blair Badcock and Marion Browett, then at the University of Adelaide, who were able to disentangle causality from correlation and implicated factors such as rising interest rates and competition for funds as a result of the then strengthening share market. Coincidentally, just as the government reversed its policy, the share market collapsed, and housing assets became more attractive, and there were more available funds for housing. The correlation between increased housing investment and policy change, though, was not causal, as many tried to claim. But back to the story. ACOS claims that negative gearing has stimulated the growth in inner-city apartments and Gold Coast apartments, rather than in affordable housing. Mr. Nahan, usually a champion of no government intervention, like labor market regulations, provision of welfare to the poor, etc., now is adding his voice to those who want a tax break for non-productive investment. He told the ABC that, quote, there is a large number of people who are not high-income, medium-income people who live in the Gold Coast, and in the apartments in Melbourne, for example, where I live. Many of them are students. Many of them are younger people, not wealthy. End quote. Well, asinine comes to mind when I heard that. Anyway, the ABC interviewer then noted the renters were not the owners, to which Nahan replied, quote, they rent them, people buy them, people rent them. What's the difference if the state builds it and rents them out? These are productive assets. People are using them. End quote. Now, we are really plumbing the depths. The difference, Mr. Nahan, is that the state in case A is giving a privileged group of property owners income tax breaks so they can speculate and get wealthier, while those who are not so privileged, while participating in the wealth generation process, are not the beneficiaries. In case B, the public sector could provide low-cost housing for the low-income earners and subsidized loans, and let the wealthier members of our society fend for themselves. And I am sure they would do this admirably, without the tax subsidy. Further, the other point is that encouraging investment in real estate is not considered a productive use of private capital. While rental income is counted in GDP, it is questionable whether it provides significant and enduring employment multipliers in the same way as an investment in plant and equipment. Second, the interview then went on to discuss the $2.5 billion that is transferred from the public sector straight into the coffers of the private health funds, the so-called private health insurance rebate. The argument made by ACOS is that this money is underwriting the wealth generation of the health industry rather than providing for better health care. Mr. Nahan has a different opinion. Read on. Quote, health insurance industry is my records are most of its non-profit. The largest one is Medibank Private, and it's unprofitable. So it's not a highly profitable industry. Each one of these things, we've had a long and vigorous debate about whether they should be done, and validly so, but the big ticket items are in fact helping in the medium to long-term lower income people. End quote. While you are choking back the tears, let me analyze this statement. In 2001, the much vaunted, but in my view totally overrated, ratings agency Standard & Poor's said that the federal government's multi-billion-dollar rebate healthcare package is equivalent to providing a massive windfall to the private health funds. The S&P report was a topic dealt with by the ABC World Today program. It was noted that in the year following the rebate's introduction, the private health insurance industry recorded a 172% surge in profits. Medibank Private had, according to the ABC interviewer, quote, achieved a profit surge other industries would die for, end quote. The explanation for the surge in profits was, according to S&P, government-induced. In more recent times, profitability has fallen a little from these Helicon days because, according to S&P, in their recent industry analysis, the health funds are facing cost pressures which will dent their profitability. This did not stop funds like Medibank Private raising premiums by 9% in 2004 before recording a profit of almost $45 million, a fourfold increase on the previous 12 months. As my blog colleague Sally noted previously, the 2003-4 annual report from the Private Health Insurance Administration Council, PHIAC, which is the government body charged with monitoring and regulating the private health insurance industry, is good reading. In that report, the latest available, you find that the equity of the private health funds by $420 million and the difference between total contribution income and total cost on benefits, including state levies, was $1 billion. Some of the individual funds registered huge increases in equity, including MBF $109 million, HBF $61 million, Medibank Private $45 million, and HCF $33 million. Good if you can get it. And these cost pressures noted by S&P, the PHIAC annual report shows that in 2003 to 4, management expenses accounted for 10% of contribution income across the industry, with 5 of the funds spending more than 15% of contribution income. These are big dollars going into a few pockets. Mr. Nahan, how is it justifiable for a free market promoter such as yourself to support a massive $2.5 billion subsidy to this avaricious industry, which continues to cry poor and creams off the premium rises to underpin the management lifestyle for a few? Especially when all the long-term unemployed could be given a job guarantee opportunity for around the same figure. But the other salient point to note, and it is not the first time I have made this point, what is the ABC doing, having characters on its primetime and influential PM program who provide this sort of nonsense? Their propensity to wheel about industry hacks who only reflect their vested interests is staggering.